338 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, also 2 picks. Manning breaking a few records in the game, but the only one that really counted was the win, which he could not produce for the Broncos. Peyton Manning on the loss.
Talking to Dave Logan, and he said, "I never heard you say you stink before." And I said, "Well, I don't usually stink, but I stunk today. We just didn't on offense didn't do the things that we talked about doing, and that starts with me. I got to play better. That's pretty plain and simple. Quarterback stinks. Usually, you're not going to win many games."
Well, he says he normally doesn't stink, but he did last night. So, Stephen, here's a question: did this, if anything, tell you something about the Broncos?
Yes, it does. What it tells me about the Broncos is that you can't believe in them away from the Mile High City. That's really what this comes down to. It doesn't mean it's a death knell. I mean, obviously, things could happen. This is the NFL. Anybody can lose on any given Sunday. We understand that. We recognize that. We know that the Denver Broncos are still one of the elite teams in the NFL. Nobody's trying to say that. But when you're elite, you're measured to the highest of standards. And the highest of standards for the Denver Broncos is going to be their ability twofold. Number one, their ability to win in Foxborough. And number two, their ability to win against Rough Riders who really punch them in the mouth on the defensive side of the ball. What are you going to do about that? And the fact is that we haven't seen that from the Denver Broncos enough to our liking. When they went up against Seattle, they were getting smacked around in that first half before they came back late in the fourth quarter and pushed that game into overtime. We know what happened to them in the Super Bowl. We saw what happened to them last night or yesterday afternoon in Foxborough, not just to their offense, but to their defense as well. And anytime you give the impression that that's what you can do to an elite team, that's a problem. That's why Tom Brady doesn't have 2 additional Super Bowls, because when New England was running roughshod over everybody else, they ran in to a New York Giants defense that for the most part neutralized New England's offense and put Eli Manning in a position with David Tyree, to use Skip's adage, to make sure a miracle happened. You look at New England, Darrelle Revis, he was manning them straight up. Browner, manning them straight up. Pushing them, checking them at the line of scrimmage, putting a body on them. Bill Belichick was mixing it up. One minute he was in man and up in your face, bump and run. The next thing you know, he laid back a little bit. The next thing you know, with Ninkovich, they were in the zone, caught a crossing pattern, didn't get caught on the same play twice. You look at these kind of things that have transpired, and what it shows is an ability to rattle the Denver Broncos if you're willing to get physical with them and punch them in the mouth. I don't understand how that happens when you have a Julius Thomas and a Marius Thomas, considering the size that they have at their disposal. When you have a speedster in Emmanuel Sanders as well and a great quarterback like Peyton Manning. But for some reason, it seems to happen. And if they played in San Diego, Skip, I would forgive them, because if you're accustomed to the beautiful weather and the sunshine and all of this other stuff, I get that. But my Lord, they play in Denver. I mean, it looks like the minute October arrives, there's always a blizzard in Denver, for crying out loud. So I don't understand how the inclement weather rattles them so much, but it appears to have play a role to some degree, along with you willing to be physical. And to me, when I look at the Denver Broncos, that's the ingredient to beat them, and that plays right into a football player's hands, because that's what football players, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, those are the rules of engagement that they want to play by, and that does not seem to work in favor of the Denver Broncos, and that's my issue.
I agree with you that away from Mile High, if you have the pieces in place, Browner and Revis, you can punch Denver in the mouth, and I thought that was effectively what happened yesterday or last night. But I'm going to give Peyton and company a break here in one way. I thought they got very unlucky with the weather. And I know you talk about, well, it can get bad, obviously, in Denver in November, December, January. But that was a rare, weird weather day for Foxborough, because it snowed in the morning, as you know, and then the winds were gusting 20 to 30 miles an hour. Well, it was rare because the forecast for tomorrow in the Boston area is a high near 60 degrees. So they happened to catch Peyton right place, wrong time, because remember, Peyton's record in temperatures below 40, any 30 or below, 39 or below, is 8-12. So 8-12 for Peyton Manning in what you would call cold weather. And not only was it cold, but it was windy. Peyton doesn't have the strongest arm, and I thought going into the wind, he had some problems throwing the football. Everybody tends to have a little bit of a problem throwing with the wind, but against it, I thought it was big advantage Tom Brady. So I'll give you that for Peyton and company. I'm not going to write them off, but I'm with you on your bottom line that not only do I think New England is a little better than they are, but remember, New England at home has now won 34 straight games against AFC teams. I mean, it's a hard place to win. They've won 14 in a row against any kind of team. Well, okay, so they got showed up. They got exposed, I think. But am I going to write them off the rest of the way? It's going to come down to who has home field advantage between New England, to me, and Denver. And we'll talk about that later in the show.
Well, that's the whole point. I mean, if New England has to go to Foxborough, Skip, nobody's picking them. And I think that's the last hope for Peyton Manning. Because, you know, when you have that level of greatness, there's nothing that's more inspirational than the world voting against you and the odds being completely stacked against you. And I think if they were to meet in the postseason and Denver had to go to Foxborough, I don't think that anybody would pick the Denver Broncos. So I think that's the last thing that could potentially work to their advantage. But I don't even see it working to their advantage under those circumstances, to be quite honest with you.
In that loss last night, Broncos allowed more first-half points than they have in any game they've had this season.